My name's Jake, and I'm 28 years old. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you my brother Evan and I were close. Growing up, we were thick as thieves building treehouses, staying up way too late playing video games, covering for each other when mom got suspicious. But somewhere along the way, that bond rotted. Maybe it was college. Maybe it was Evan getting a taste of being better because he got a fancier job first. Maybe it was just who he always was underneath. Either way, by the time we hit our 20s, Evan treated me like the family screw-up. And no matter what I accomplished, it was never enough to change that in his eyes. The final straw wasn't some massive, explosive argument. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, Evan joking about how I still rented my place while he bought a condo, laughing off my promotion as cute, rolling his eyes when I brought a girlfriend around. At every family gathering, he'd find some little way to humiliate me in front of everyone, playing it off like I was too sensitive if I ever called him out. "Lighten up, Jake," he'd say, clapping me on the back a little too hard. "It's just a joke. If you can't laugh at yourself, who can you laugh at?" I swallowed it for years. Partly because my parents always acted like Evan could do no wrong, and partly because I stupidly kept hoping he'd grow out of it. Spoiler, he didn't. When he got engaged to Melissa, I was genuinely happy for him at first. I figured maybe marriage would settle him down, make him realize the world didn't revolve around him. Melissa seemed sweet enough, too, a little high-strung, but polite whenever we crossed paths. I didn't go to the bachelor party because I couldn't get time off work, but I still sent a gift and a card wishing him the best. I thought that would be enough. Then, about 3 weeks before the wedding, I got the text. "Don't even think about coming to my wedding," Evan wrote. "You'll just ruin it like you ruin everything." I just sat there staring at it for a long time, feeling that old familiar sting creep up my chest. I shouldn't have been surprised. He'd made snide remarks about the guest list before, like how he had to invite certain people, with a meaningful look in my direction. But seeing it spelled out, flat and cruel, still hit harder than I expected. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, feeling the weight of it, the embarrassment, the anger. I pictured him laughing with Melissa and their friends, probably passing my text around for a good chuckle. I could almost hear his voice in my head, mocking, dismissive. But then something in me shifted. Maybe it was the years of letting him treat me like a punching bag. Maybe it was just the sheer gall of it. After everything I'd put up with, he thought he could cut me out like I was some embarrassing footnote and expect me to just take it? I smiled. A real smile. The kind that starts slow but settles deep into your bones. I replied, "Good luck hosting a wedding in a venue you don't own anymore." It took him less than 2 minutes to text back. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. You see, 6 months earlier, I bought a piece of property through a real estate auction. It was a good deal, close to town, an old winery that had gone bankrupt. I hadn't done much with it yet, fixed a few leaks, cleared some of the brush, but I was planning to turn it into an event space eventually. What I hadn't realized until that moment was that Evan's dream venue for his wedding. Yeah, it was that property. Apparently, the winery's previous owners had still been listing it for private events after they went under, hoping to squeeze a few bucks out before the place officially changed hands. They hadn't updated their records or told any of their clients that the land no longer belonged to them. And Evan, of course, hadn't bothered doing any real research. He just threw down a deposit, signed a shaky rental contract, and assumed everything would go his way because it always had before. It was almost too perfect. At first, I wavered. I mean, it was his wedding. Was I really going to pull the rug out from under the biggest day of his life? Part of me, the little brother who still remembered building forts and swapping Halloween candy, whispered that maybe I should just let it go. Be the bigger person. But then I remembered all the times he laughed at me. All the dinners where he made me the punchline. The birthday where he forgot to invite me, then laughed it off like I was being dramatic. The way he'd humiliated me over and over, always expecting me to come crawling back. No, I wasn't going to be the bigger person this time. I started making calls. First, to a real estate lawyer to confirm that, legally, I was absolutely within my rights to shut the whole thing down. Spoiler, I was. Then, to the security company I'd used when I first took ownership to arrange a team to monitor the venue the weekend of the wedding. And finally, a quiet email to the county clerk's office, informing them that an unlicensed event was attempting to operate without the proper permits on my property. You know, just in case Evan tried to pull anything shady once he realized what was happening. The week leading up to the wedding was almost surreal. I didn't hear a word from Evan. No apology. No backtracking. He must have figured I was bluffing, or that even if I wasn't, he'd somehow talk his way around it. That's always how things worked out for him. Meanwhile, my parents kept sending out chirpy group texts about can't wait to see everyone at the wedding, as if nothing was wrong. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The storm was already rolling in. The night before the big day, I drove out to the property. The winery still looked a little rough around the edges, overgrown vines, cracked flagstones, but the bones were beautiful, especially at sunset. I parked off to the side where I wouldn't be seen and just watched as Evan's team bustled around setting up tables, flowers, a giant arch draped in gauzy white fabric. I recognized a few of his friends laughing by the catering truck, completely oblivious. Evan himself was strutting around barking orders, sunglasses perched on his head, acting like the king of the world. I just sat there in the car, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, feeling strangely calm. This wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was balance. It was the universe setting the scales right for once. The security team arrived around midnight, a quiet procession of black SUVs with professional, no-nonsense guards. I introduced myself, shook hands, confirmed everything was ready. We agreed to wait until the guests arrived the next morning. No need to spoil the surprise too early. I barely slept that night. Not from nerves, but from sheer anticipation. Years of swallowing my pride, bottling up the hurt. It was all finally about to break free. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, not a cloud in the sky. I dressed neatly but casually, jeans, a button-up, sunglasses. I didn't need to make a scene. The situation would do that for me. I arrived a little before the ceremony was supposed to start. The parking lot was filling up fast, guests in suits and summer dresses laughing and chatting as they made their way toward the main lawn. A string quartet was tuning up somewhere behind the winery. And Evan, was standing near the archway, straightening his tie, a self-satisfied grin on his face. I leaned casually against my car, arms crossed, and waited. It didn't take long. At first, it was just a few murmurs, confused guests glancing around, clutching their little gift bags or trays of appetizers. Then, like a fuse catching fire, the panic spread. I watched as groups of people huddled together, whispering urgently. Bridesmaids in matching dresses shuffled awkwardly in their heels. One of the groomsmen pulled out his phone, clearly trying to call someone, his voice getting louder and more frantic by the second. Evan didn't notice at first. He was too busy grinning for pictures near the arch with Melissa, who looked stunning in her gown. For a brief second, watching them, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. If maybe, just maybe, I was ruining something bigger than just Evan's ego. Then I saw him glance over, frown, and start striding across the lawn, barking. What's going on? Who told the band to stop playing? One of the security guards, let's call him Tom, intercepted him. Tom was built like a linebacker, with a shaved head and dark sunglasses that reflected Evan's furious face back at him. Sir, Tom said, calm and professional. You need to clear the premises. This is private property. You're trespassing. Evan laughed, loud and incredulous. What are you talking about? I rented this place. Tom didn't even blink. Ownership changed. Event canceled. Please exit the property. By now, Melissa had caught up, her veil slightly askew and her face growing paler by the second. She tugged Evan's sleeve and whispered something urgently. Evan waved her off and turned his attention toward the crowd, his voice rising. Everyone stay where you are. This is a mistake. I paid for this venue. That was my cue. I pushed off from my car and walked forward, slow and deliberate, hands in my pockets. Heads turned as I approached. A few people gasped when they recognized me. I ignored them and kept my eyes locked on Evan. He spotted me when I was about 20 feet away. His face twisted into a snarl, like he'd just bitten into something rotten. You, he hissed, taking a step forward. What did you do? I stopped a few feet away, giving him a pleasant, almost pitying smile. I bought it, I said simply. 6 months ago. You might have known that if you bothered to do even a little research. You're lying. He snapped. I have a contract. With the previous owners, I said, shrugging, who no longer had the legal right to rent it out. That contract's invalid. Sorry. He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, then seemed to realize he was gathering an audience. Melissa's parents were standing nearby, their faces pinched with confusion and horror. One of Melissa's bridesmaids was openly filming with her phone, trying and failing to look discreet. Melissa clutched his arm again. Evan, she said through gritted teeth. Fix this. Now. He turned back to me, and for a second, I thought he was going to swing at me. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. You're ruining my wedding. He spat. No, I said quietly, my voice carrying. You ruined our relationship years ago. This? This is just me finally choosing not to take it anymore. I saw something flicker across his face then, not just anger, but fear. The realization that he wasn't in control for once. That he couldn't smooth talk or bully his way out of this. He tried anyway. Fine, he said, forcing a tight smile. We'll pay you. Whatever you want. Just let us have the ceremony. We'll be gone in a couple of hours. I almost laughed. It was such a classic Evan move. Wait until the absolute last second, then throw money at the problem like it would magically erase everything. But I shook my head. Not for sale. His face crumpled. Behind him, guests were streaming back toward the parking lot. Mothers in high heels carrying crying toddlers. Men loosening their ties, muttering under their breath. The string quartet was packing up their instruments with brisk, efficient movements. The caterers were rolling their carts away. Melissa was crying now. Silent, furious tears. Her makeup was starting to smear. Security guards were gently but firmly guiding people off the property, making it clear this wasn't up for negotiation. A few people tried to argue. One red-faced uncle swore he knew a guy on the city council, but the guards were professionals. Calm, polite, unyielding. I stood there, hands in my pockets, and watched Evan's perfect day collapse like a house of cards. I thought he might scream. Thought he might lunge at me. Part of me almost hoped he would. There was a twisted satisfaction in imagining him hauled off the property in handcuffs on his wedding day. But he didn't. He just stood there, swaying slightly, looking around at the wreckage. His parents were red-faced and shouting at the security guards. Melissa's mother was sobbing into a handkerchief. The DJ was dragging his speakers back to his van. The florist was yanking down flowers from the arch, petals scattering like confetti. It was over. I turned and walked back to my car without another word, the faint crunch of gravel under my shoes the only sound in the sudden, stunned silence. As I reached for the door handle, my phone buzzed. A new message from Evan. I'm done with you. I smiled, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. I drove away slowly, savoring the view in the rearview mirror, Evan standing in the middle of the empty lot, shoulders hunched, while Melissa's veil blew sideways in the wind like some sad, abandoned flag. If there was ever a symbol for what their marriage would probably look like, that was it. I didn't head straight home. I needed to clear my head. So I swung by a little coffee shop I liked on the edge of town, the kind of place with peeling paint on the sign and mismatched mugs that felt more like visiting a friend's house than a business. I ordered a black coffee and took a seat by the window, pulling out my phone. The messages were already rolling in. The first few were from Evan, predictable rants. How could you do this to me? You're a psychopath. I hope you rot alone. I didn't bother responding. What could I say that my actions hadn't already screamed louder? Then came the messages from family. My mom's popped up first. Jake. Call me. Now. Followed by, what have you done? Your brother is devastated. And then, we raised you better than this. I stared at that last one for a long time. Raised me better? This from the woman who, for years, chuckled along with Evan's digs, who patted me on the shoulder and said, don't be so sensitive, like I was the problem every time I dared show an ounce of hurt. Another text buzzed in. My dad, for once brief and blunt, we need to talk. I didn't answer. I just sipped my coffee and scrolled. There were a few unexpected messages, too. My cousin Brian sent a simple, about time someone put him in his place. An old family friend chimed in, saw the chaos. Honestly, you did everyone a favor. Even my roommate, who knew only bits and pieces of the drama, texted, dude, you're a legend. I couldn't help but chuckle at that one, low and bitter. A legend. Maybe. Or just a guy who finally got tired of being the family punching bag. An hour passed. 2. I watched the sunlight shift across the cracked floor tiles, feeling lighter. Emptier, too, but in a good way. Like breathing clean air after years of choking on smog. Eventually, I knew I had to head home. I couldn't hide in that little coffee shop forever, tempting as it was. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something right away, a car parked across the street, engine still running. A sleek, black sedan. Evan's car. He was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a molar. For a split second, I considered backing out and driving off again. But no, I was done running. I parked, killed the engine, and got out slowly, keeping my movements calm and measured. Evan pushed off the car and stalked across the street toward me. You think this is funny? He barked before I even closed my door. His face was red, veins popping at his temples. I shrugged, leaning casually against the car door. No. I think it's sad. You could have had everything you wanted today. You just didn't think the rules applied to you. The rules? He spat. You're my brother. Yeah, I said softly. I was. He stared at me, breathing hard. I could see him struggling, the gears turning behind his bloodshot eyes, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to guilt me, how to make himself the victim. It was almost impressive, in a way, how fast he could shift his narrative. He tried a different tactic. His voice softened, fake, syrupy. Jake, come on, man. It's not too late. Just, let's figure something out. I'll apologize. You want me to get down on my knees? Fine. Whatever you want. Just undo this. I shook my head slowly. That's not how it works. You don't get to treat someone like garbage for years and then expect them to bail you out the second it matters. You're ruining my life, he whispered, raw and shaking. I looked him dead in the eyes. No, I'm just finally letting you deal with the consequences of your own actions. He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, but nothing came out. Instead, he just stood there, breathing heavily, fist clenching and unclenching at his sides. And then, almost pathetically, he sagged, like a puppet with its strings cut. He turned and stomped back toward his car, muttering something under his breath, probably every insult he could think of. I watched him peel out of the neighborhood, tires screeching as he took the corner too fast. The adrenaline drained out of me all at once, leaving me shaky but exhilarated. It was over. Not just today, all of it. The years of being second best. The quiet dinners where my successes were ignored and my failures were magnified. The holidays where Evan was the golden boy and I was the afterthought. I went inside, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. My phone kept buzzing from across the room, but I didn't check it. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the strange, unfamiliar weight of real freedom settle around me. And that's when a knock rattled the front door. I froze, sitting up slowly. Another knock, harder this time, impatient. I crossed the living room and peeked through the peephole. Standing there, arms crossed and face grim, was my mother. I stared through the peephole for a long moment, debating. A big part of me wanted to turn around, walk back to the couch, and pretend I wasn't home. But something in the way my mom stood there, rigid, arms clamped tight across her chest, foot tapping like she owned the place, made my stomach knot. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to fix me. Or, more accurately, to scold me into fixing what she thought I broke. I opened the door a crack, keeping my body between her and the inside of the house. Jake, she said sharply, like my name tasted bad in her mouth. We need to talk. I didn't move. About. She narrowed her eyes. Don't play dumb. Your brother is heartbroken. You embarrassed this entire family today. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my face neutral. He told me not to come. So I didn't. Seems like I did exactly what he wanted. You know that's not what he meant, she snapped, voice rising. You humiliated him. On his wedding day. Funny, I said, my voice flat. All I did was enforce the fact that it's my property. I didn't prank him. I didn't ruin the catering. I didn't crash the wedding and make a scene. I just exercised my legal rights. You knew what it would do, she hissed. You knew it would destroy everything. There it was. The same tone she used when Evan failed a class and she blamed his teachers. When he crashed Dad's car and she blamed the road conditions. When he broke up with his high school girlfriend and she blamed the girl for not being good enough for him. It had never been Evan's fault. And now it wasn't his fault he hadn't checked the venue ownership before throwing his dream wedding there. It was mine because I hadn't let it go. I crossed my arms, mirroring her. You know what's funny? For years, Evan treated me like garbage. You laughed it off. You told me to be the bigger person. Well, guess what? Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. You could have talked to him, she said, voice shrill now. Worked it out. Family is supposed to forgive. I let out a small laugh, one that tasted bitter in my mouth. Forgiveness only works when the other person's sorry. Has Evan even once said he regretted anything he ever did to me? Has he even once treated me like family, instead of an afterthought? Her mouth opened, then closed. For a second, she looked almost guilty. Almost. But then she straightened her spine, lifting her chin in that stubborn, proud way she always had. This isn't about you, she said coldly. This is about your brother. About what you cost him today. No, I said quietly. It's about you never holding him accountable. And now, for the first time in his life, he's facing consequences. And you can't stand it. The words hung between us, sharp and heavy. She stared at me like she didn't even recognize me. Maybe she didn't. Maybe, in her mind, I was still supposed to be the easygoing, smiling kid who took every slight with a shrug and a strained laugh. She stepped forward as if to push past me. Instinctively, I shifted, blocking the doorway fully. "You're not welcome here right now," I said, voice low. "You can call me when you're ready to have a real conversation. One that doesn't start with blaming me for your golden boy's mistakes." Her face flushed an ugly shade of red. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You're cutting yourself off from your family." I smiled, slow and tired. "Maybe, but at least I'm finally free." I closed the door gently but firmly in her face, locking it with a soft click. For a moment, I stood there, hand on the knob, heart pounding. I half expected her to pound on the door, to scream and cause a scene. But after a few long beats of silence, I heard her heels click down the steps and the slam of her car door. I sagged against the door, feeling more drained than triumphant. But even through the exhaustion, there was a strange lightness in my chest. Like I'd set down a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for years. The next few days were a blur of fallout. My phone blew up nonstop. Some family members sent angry texts. Others sent sad ones. A few cousins, the ones who had always quietly sided with me, reached out to say they understood. They even confessed they admired what I did, that they wished they had the courage to draw their own boundaries. I ignored most of it. At work, people kept asking why I seemed different. Lighter. Happier. I just smiled and said I'd done a little spring cleaning, the kind that didn't involve closets or garages. Evan didn't try to reach out again. Neither did my mom or my dad. Word got around that Melissa had been furious, not just at Evan, but at his entire family for the embarrassment. Their honeymoon was postponed indefinitely. I heard through the grapevine that Melissa's parents were considering suing the winery for emotional distress until their lawyer explained they didn't have a case, because technically, the only person they could sue was Evan himself for negligence. Poetic, really. A few weeks later, I got an official-looking letter in the mail. For a second, my stomach twisted. A lawsuit? But no, it was from the county, notifying me that my request to rezone the winery into an official event space had been approved. I sat there in my living room, letter in hand, and laughed until my sides hurt. I spent the next few months fixing up the winery properly. I hired contractors to fix the leaks, landscapers to tame the wild gardens. I installed new floors, painted the battered walls, strung fairy lights between the old oak trees outside. It was exhausting and expensive and completely exhilarating. When it was finally ready, I held a small, private event, a soft opening, just for friends and a few handpicked clients. It wasn't huge. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Standing there on that warm evening, music floating through the air, the vines rustling gently in the breeze, I realized something. I hadn't just reclaimed my dignity that day at the wedding. I'd reclaimed my future. No longer weighed down by toxic family dynamics. No longer trapped in a cycle of guilt and resentment. I was free to build something real, something lasting. And if Evan, or my parents, or anyone else couldn't stand to see me succeed without them, that wasn't my problem anymore. As the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting everything in a soft, golden glow, I lifted a glass of champagne and toasted, not to revenge, not to vindication, but to peace. Finally, after all these years, I had found it, and I wasn't giving it up for anything.